Hey, world history. This is Miss Corey. Welcome to Unit 9, which is all about the Middle Ages, specifically the European Middle Ages. Welcome to U9-L1, Intro to the Middle Age Europe. You're going to watch this Ed puzzle answer the question. Any questions that are in blue text are going to be questions I want you to answer directly on the Ed puzzle. And if you have any questions, of course, please let us know. We are here to help you. So the fun part of Unit 9 when it comes to the Middle Ages is actually there's only one social studies standard that we have to hit, which is identify different historical perspectives about religion, slavery, feudalism, and disease in Europe and the Mediterranean world, including the Ottoman Empire. All right, so we will for sure talk about religion in this unit. Slavery, we'll talk a little bit more about on the Age of Exploration unit. Feudalism, we will for sure talk about even today. And of course, there's disease, because what is the Middle Ages known for? Disease. We talked about the Ottoman Empire in Unit 7 a little bit, so we might touch on it a little bit, but not too much during this unit. So here is our course calendar for Unit 9. And do pay attention because some of the due dates are different than what we normally do in the semester. So we start off here with U9-L1, Intro to Middle Age Europe. Next up, you're going to do U9-L2, Women in the Middle Ages in Eastern Orthodox Church. U9-L3, Bis Claveret, Reading and Quiz. U9-L4, The Dark Ages Part 1. U9-L5, The Dark Ages Part 2. U9-L6, The Dark Ages Part 3, U9-L7, Power of the Church, U9-L8, Crusades Parts 1 and 2, and then we're going to wrap up this unit with a test. So for the semester, if you've noticed, I have yet to give you like a summative test. The reason for that, because, tests don't show a whole lot of like learning or the ability that of skills that you've learned throughout the units. But to be honest, since this is going to be the unit that pushes right up against the end of the semester, we're just going to do a test as the summative for this unit because it's just easier to grade, to be completely honest with you. It's not going to be a big test or anything like that. It'll be pretty simple. And again, it's just about Unit 9. It's not about any of the previous units, just Unit 9. All right, so important due dates are ahead. So if you are playing on your phone or whatever, put it down, please, for just a minute and pay attention to these due dates because they're very important. All right, so the end of this unit is the end of the semester. There's no final test covering everything we learned. Your final test is just about the Unit 9 test. We already did the review in Unit 8, which I am really curious to see how you all did with that. As I make this video, we haven't done Unit 8 yet, so I'm really intrigued. So heads up, all missing/late work from Unit 0 through 8 are going to be due Sunday, January 11th at midnight. No exceptions. So for those of you who always keep up on your work and turn it in on time, thank you, thank you, thank you. I see you out there. I really appreciate it. For those of you who maybe have a lot of work missing or maybe have just a few assignments here and there, do note that all the missing and late work is going to be due Sunday, January 11th at midnight. If it is not turned in by then, it will become a permanent 0. I will not be grading it. Okay? So if you don't turn it in by then, it'll become a permanent 0. Got it? Got it. Okay, so let's talk about Unit 9 due dates. So Unit 9 Week 1 work will be due Sunday, January 11th at midnight too. Okay, so make sure you get it done on time. And then Unit 9 Week 2 work will be due Friday, January 16th at midnight. Let me repeat that. Unit 9 Week 2 work will be due Friday, January 16th at midnight. That includes your Unit 9 test. Okay? If you do not turn it in by Friday, January 16th at midnight, it will become a permanent 0. I will not be grading anything that is turned in after Friday, January 16th at midnight. So get it done and get it turned in. Okay? Whew. All right, let's do a quiz time. When is all late/missing work from Unit 0 through 8 due? Sunday, January 11th at midnight. If it is not turned in by then, it becomes a permanent 0. Okay, another question. When is Unit 9 Weeks 1 work due? Also, Sunday, January 11th at midnight. No exceptions. Turn it in. I know you can do it. All right, Then when is Unit 9 Week Two's work due? Friday, January 16th at midnight. Okay? Friday, January 16th at midnight. I could repeat that over and over and over again. So make sure you get your work in on time, okay? If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, email your teacher now. Do not wait. Email them now. Okay, let's get started with our slideshow. So, the Middle Ages. You might also hear the words medieval ages or dark ages. I want to let you know that they all mean the same thing. So, in this slideshow or in any of the videos we watch, if you hear medieval ages or dark ages, just know it means the same thing as the Middle Ages. So, when you think of the Middle Ages, what do you think of? Maybe a few things. You might think about peasants. We will definitely talk about peasants today. You might think about the Crusades. We'll talk about that at the end of next week. You might think of castles, because castles are pretty cool. You might think of artwork, such as pretty unicorns, although those are not very pretty unicorns. You might think of ladies, too, with extremely long necks. Jeez, I hope they're okay. We might also think of knights. You might think of, like, priests and monks and saints. And you might think about diseases, because there was a lot of diseases. So, how did we get here? How did we get to the Middle Ages? So, going back a few units, we talked about the Roman Empire, and that ended in 330. And it ended for various reasons. We talked about them, like being hard to govern because it was just too big of an empire, the invasions of the foreign people, especially the Germanic people, up in what is modern day Germany, economic hardship, and the rise of Christianity as well. We talked about the Byzantine Empire, if you remember that. That was at the very end of the Roman unit. So the Byzantine Empire was from 330 to 1453. It was founded by Constantine after the Roman Empire split into two. And Constantine was a huge supporter of Christianity, and the capital was moved to Constantinople instead of Rome. So here's a timeline here. I'll use more timelines as we get into semester two, just because there's a lot going on like in the world, especially when we come to like the age of exploration, which will be in a couple of units. So to put it into perspective here, so we have the Byzantine Empire from 330 to 1453. The Middle Ages lasted from about 500 to 1500 CE, especially in Europe. And then later on, I believe next unit, at the start of semester two, we'll talk about the Renaissance. So the Renaissance starts in about the 1200s to the 1600s. So you see that a lot of these timelines overlap each other, which can get a little confusing. But again, for this unit, we'll stick pretty much just to the Middle Ages in Western Europe. But to put it in perspective as well, we're kind of butting up against the timeline when North and South America are being discovered by Europeans. So, for example, Ponce de Leon lands in Florida in 1503. So that's just right after approximately the Middle Ages ends. So we talked about the Byzantine Empire a few units ago, but the Byzantine Empire saw Western Europe as hopeless. There were too many small tribes trying to invade the once Roman land. It was just simply a mess. The Byzantine Empire, if you remember, is located in Constantinople, which is in modern day Turkey, which is right here. And they abandoned Western Europe and focused on Eastern Europe by 568. So, pretty much, the empire split in half. We talked about that before, the Byzantine Empire, with West and East. And Eastern, or the Byzantine Empire, was like, hey, you know what? You are too much to handle, Western Europe. Go fend for yourselves. We're not protecting you anymore. And then Western Europe is like, wow, thanks for totally ditching me, especially the Pope, because if you remember in Christianity, the Pope is located in Rome, Italy, which is in Western Europe. So pretty much Byzantine just totally ditches the Pope. So the Byzantine Empire left the city of Rome to fend for themselves. They literally abandoned their symbol of being the continuation of the Roman Empire. So if you remember back a few units ago, we talked about how the Byzantine Empire saw themselves as a continuation of the Roman Empire, which wasn't true because they literally left the city of Rome, which was the heart and soul of the Roman Empire. This is a huge problem. The Christian church's leader is the Pope, and he is located in Rome. He still is today, even. As you can imagine, the Pope was not happy about this, and we'll talk about what the Pope does for revenge when we talk about King Pepin in a little bit. So again, here's that kind of map. So Constantinople, Byzantine Empire, Western Europe. Constantinople just cuts ties with Western Europe. They're done. They broke up. So sad. All right, so for now, we will just talk solely about Western Europe. We'll talk more about the Byzantine Empire in the next lesson. So, Middle Ages, European countries and kingdoms are in constant fluctuation. Borders were always moving due to battles for lands and rivalries between kingdoms. That's why it's really hard for this unit to put up maps, because as you can see here, there's like so many colors and like so many little like kingdoms and places and like islands of people and very confusing. So that's why I don't use too many maps when I talk about Middle Ages, because it like does more harm than good almost. So there is so much to learn about the Middle Ages. This is what we're going to focus on for the next 2 weeks. Feudalism and serfdom and peasants, which we'll talk all about today. Women in the Middle Ages. Eastern Orthodox Church. Women's writing in the Middle Ages, which we'll talk about Bisclaveret. Disease, power of the Catholic Church, and the Crusades. So let's start with peasants. So, what is a peasant? A peasant is a poor farmer who owns a small piece of land or rents land from a lord. Peasants can also be called serfs, by the way. So, if you hear that word, you can use it interchangeably between peasants and serfs. It doesn't matter to me. A lord is a wealthy landowner. So, they could either be a knight, so a knight is a high ranking soldier, or they could be part of the nobility. So, they could be like a baron, a count, or a duke, or something like that. Lords would live in large countryside houses called a manor. And then we have feudalism. So, feudalism is a type of political system. It is where the king gave land to nobles, such as lords. In return, those nobles or lords pledged their loyalty to the king. The nobles and lords then forced the peasants to farm the land. So, literally, it'll be the king, and he's like, here's some land, lords. And the lords are like, yes, king, I will go and have these peasants farm it for me. So peasants and lords worked under the social system of feudalism. Lords were considered vassals to the king. So here is a social pyramid. We've seen social pyramids in other civilizations we've talked about. So this one is specifically about the Middle Ages in Western Europe. So as you could probably imagine, at the very tippy top is the king. Below him, we have the lords, which are the vassals to the king. So they work under the king. Underneath the lords, we have the knights. So the knights work for the lords, they protect the land. And then at the very bottom here, we have the peasants. So a vassal is someone who works under a higher authority. So in return, the lord swears allegiance to the king. The lords would then oversee the knights, as well as the farmland and the peasants. 9 out of 10 people in Europe were peasants in the Middle Ages. They became peasants due to lords and the church owning most of the farmland. So that means that these individual people could not own their own land. They had to rent it from the rich. So lords and churches had a monopoly on the land. Middle class in Europe mostly disappeared during the Middle Ages. So either you were a peasant, you're an industrial laborer, you're a miner, a craftsman, and if you're really lucky, you could be a noble or a priest. Life as a peasant, to say it very bluntly, was very depressing. They rented the land to farm from the Lord, but in return, they didn't get to keep what they farmed. They had to give the majority of their harvest back to the Lord as payment. So they would work all day farming the land, and then they wouldn't even get to keep what they grew. They bought tools from the Lord. They bought clothes and other household items from the Lord. They even rented the houses from the Lord. They didn't even own their own houses. So, what do you think is the problem with the relationship between peasants and their Lord? So, peasants bought and rented everything from a Lord. So, the Lord could increase prices anytime he liked, even for no apparent reason. So, the Lord would suck the peasant dry of all of their money. So peasants labored about 54 hours a week, both men and women. And on top of that, women also had to take care of the kids. Lords lived in manors, which are large stone houses or castles in the countryside. Here's an example of what a manor looks like, at least today. That's in England, by the way. 15 to 30 peasants lived in one-room wooden houses. That's right. You had to, like, live this horrible laboring life, and you didn't even have your own room. You had to share it with 15 to 30 other people. There were no education, there was no schools on these lords' lands, and the peasants could not leave the land either. So even if they're like, "Hey, I have a cousin over in the next village over," nope, you could never go see them. You had to stay in the village. If a peasant ran away, they'd be captured and brought back to the farm. And the average life expectancy for a peasant was about 35 years old. So let's see, you guys are what, about 15, 16 years old? So you're kind of hitting your midlife crisis if you were a peasant right now. All right, here's kind of just an overview of what a lord's manors might look like. So, of course, you have the big house. You may have a church. Of course, the church probably wouldn't be that big. If you're really lucky, you might have a mill. You might have a blacksmith. And then you have the cottages over here for all the peasants. So, why do you think the lords didn't want the peasants to interact with other lords' villages and towns? It's kind of a big question. So lords wanted full control over the peasants. If peasants didn't go to town, that means there were no trading of ideas with each other. Peasants were also not educated, meaning they can't read and write and spread ideas through written work. Also, during this time, there was a warming period. So this happened about 950 CE. The earth was warming. A warmer climate meant that more land could be farmed, which meant that more food could be produced, which meant that the more mouths could be fed, which meant there could be more people. So in about 950, there was about 25 million people living in Europe. And between 1100 and 1445, the population of Europe tripled to 100 million people. That's insane. That's a lot of people. All right, enough talking about peasants. Let's talk about the Franks next. So when we talk about the Franks, they have like their first homeland would be in what is modern day Germany and parts of France. So we're looking kind of right here at this dark kind of green territory. So after the fall of the Roman Empire, what we see as modern day Germany and France was not united. As you can see back in this picture here, it's like cut up a bunch of different ways. Small tribes ruled small areas of land, and there's constant changing of leaders and wars. Until dun 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 dun. This dude Clovis comes along. So he ruled from about 509 to 511. He's the king of a tribe of Germanic people called the Franks. His wife, Clothilde, converted him to Christianity. So Clovis was battling a rival Germanic tribe and was losing. He then prayed to the Christian God out of desperation, saying that if he won, he would get baptized. So here's a question. What do you think happened to Clovis? Just take your best guess. He won. Yeah. Very similar story to Constantine. So he and 3,000 of his soldiers kept good on their promise and got baptized. And the Catholic Church saw this huge victory in what Clovis did. And they're like, hey, Clovis, come here to Rome. I want to help you out. Remember, Rome was the capital of the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church supported Clovis's military campaigns to defeat all the Germanic tribes. And by 511, Clovis defeated all of the Germanic tribes. That's pretty quick. So all tribes are the Frank people now are under the rule of Clovis. So kind of here's a map. So it started right here with kind of this darker green area. And then under Clovis, it would expand to this kind of more like army green looking areas, which is quite a bit considering what? That was just a few years. So King Clovis died in 511. By then, Franks had the largest kingdom in Europe. And on top of that, they're best friends with the Catholic Church. So, how do you think the Catholic Church spread Christianity to the Franks? Take your best guess. Many parts of Europe were rural. There are no major cities with cathedrals, which are those really big, large churches. So the church decided to build something called monasteries. A monastery, that's the Christian communities that include a church, monks and priests, which are male worship leaders, as well as nuns who are female holy followers. Monks. They led worship services. They also were really important because they copied books by hand, especially the Bible. So there was no printing press yet in Europe. We'll talk about that later. They would also open schools. Of course, those schools were just for male students, not female. They were historians and they would archive libraries. Nuns, they were holy women. So just like priests and monks, they could not get married, but nuns were one of the special class of women who could get educated. So they were educated in things like Latin, arithmetic, grammar, music, morals, rhetoric, geometry, and astronomy. Mostly nuns became nuns for religious reasons, but also if they wanted to run away from their family or if there was an arranged marriage they didn't agree with, they could just kind of run away and become a nun. They were also scholars and wrote their own religious theories. All right, next let's talk about tithes. So, a tenth of all the money, profits, or food grown by a person must be given to the church as a tax. So, the lords had to give the church a tenth of the food that the peasants grew. So, think of that. If you're a peasant, the Lord takes all your food and then gives some of it away to the church. And craftsmen and others had to give a tenth of their monetary profits to the church as well. And it was to support church and its monks and its nuns. Through monasteries, nuns and monks spread Christianity to locals. There's also missionaries as well, who could be nuns, monks, or just everyday Christians, go to non-Christian land and spread the word of the Christian God. So Christianity became very popular, not only in places once ruled by the Roman Empire, but beyond that too, especially in northern regions of Europe. So the Catholic Church was centered in Rome. More and more Christian followers meant that there would be more and more power to the church. In 590, Pope Gregor I declared the church as secular. Secular means that the church and its leaders have influence over politics across Europe. It was an intermixed church and political powers. A good example of that would be a royal coronation. So here's more of a modern day photo of a royal coronation. This is of Queen Elizabeth II of England. So when you think of coronation, what does the ceremony usually include? So a coronation is when a person is crowned king or later on queen, and it is where that person is given the crown of the kingdom. There's typically a high ranking priest, or for more modern day England, a minister that anoints the person. It is both a political and a religious ceremony. All right, let's wrap this up. Today we learned about peasants, lords, manors, vassals, clovis, franks, monastery, tithes, secular, and coronation. Next up, you're going to do U9-L2, Women in the Middle Ages in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Questions? Want to learn more? Please let us know. We are here to help you out, okay? Thanks for watching. Bye.